Okay, let's keep reading the 13th Reality Journal of Curious Letters. We're up to chapter 51, Homecoming. The next day and a half were a complete blur for Tick. Mothball broke the news of Annika's death to Master George and Rutger, neither of whom bothered trying to hide their emotions, weeping like children on each other's shoulders. Not much was said after that, except that Annika's courage in sacrificing her life to steal the barrier wand would never be forgotten. Tick hadn't known her at all, but he still felt sad she was gone. As for how Tick had winked them away to safety, no one understood what had happened, least of all Master George. He kept saying that the amount of conviction Tick had channeled, the sheer energy of his desire to wink himself and the others back to Reality Prime, should have killed him. It must have been such an unusual display of Chicada that the instruments back in the triangle didn't know how to measure it, or surely Rutger would have noticed an anomaly. Eventually, everyone grew tired of so many questions without answers and looked ahead to what came next. Going home. Master George said that even though Mistress Jane had kept her Chicada drive, it was useless without the wand casing. It would take her several months to build a new barrier wand capable of using its power. For now, she and her newfound dark and twisted magic were trapped within the 13th reality. The new Realitant's successful mission had bought them considerable time that Master George needed to prepare his headquarters, plan for the future, and think about the potential meaning of Tick's unexplained ability. As young as the Realitants were, with worried families, Master George thought it best that they return to their homes, explain their futures, and continue their studies, all until such a time came that Master George needed them again. And need them he would. He assured them over and over. And so late that night, Tick, Sophia, Sato, and Paul stood in a circle by the roaring fire. Master George loved fires, even in the middle of the desert in summer. With Master George and his two assistants, Mothball and Rutger, everyone was silent, the reality of saying goodbye a heavy weight on their shoulders. As for Tick, he felt like his soul hurt. Though he'd only known these people a short time, the experiences they'd been through had solidified them as the very best of friends he'd ever had. He felt excited to see his family, but dreaded the thought of going to bed tonight alone in his room, not knowing how long it might be before he'd see any of the Realitants again. It took every ounce of will in his bones to keep from crying. "Sato, my young friend," Master George said, finally breaking the sombre silence, "I'd like to invite you to stay with us and to help us at the Triangle. These others have families to return to, but, I think you'd likely agree that joining us at the headquarters may be in your best interest. Your, guardians will barely notice you're gone, I expect." Tick looked at Sato, shocked. The quiet boy from Japan hadn't said much since their return from the 13th reality. Sato looked up, trying to hide the relief on his face, but failing. "I will stay." He looked at Tick, then the others, as if he wanted desperately to say something. Instead, he folded his arms and looked away. Tick's whole perception of Sato changed in that instant. What mysteries are hidden inside that brain of his? "We'll simply be delighted to have your help," Master George said. "Now then, it's almost time to wink everyone back to their homes. But first, I have something to give all of you." He reached into the folds of his suit and pulled out a handful of thin gold link chains, a heavy pendant swinging from each one. "These will forever mark you as an official and bona fide Realitants." Tick stared at the shiny gold ornament as Master George placed the chain over his head like he'd just won an Olympic medal. Tick studied the object hanging on the chain, bringing it close to his eyes for a better look. It was a miniature replica of a barrier wand, dials and all, solid and heavy. "Be sure to wear them under your shirts," Master George said as he stepped back in front of the group. "No need to go around advertising you're a member." go around advertising you're a member of the most important society in the world. Plenty of enemies about. As Tick tucked the wand pendant under his scarf and shirt, feeling the cold hardness warm up against his skin, Rutger began passing out small pieces of thick paper to each of the kids. These are your official membership cards, so don't lose them. Tick accepted his, a stiff brown card that simply said, Atticus Higginbottom, Realitant Second Class. Whoa, Paul said. No one will mess with us now. I'll just whip out this puppy and they'll run like scared dogs. Very funny, young man, Rutger said, holding his chubby arms. You just be sure to hold on to your wand and pendant and that card. You've earned them both. Yes, indeed, Master George said. And now we must really let you be on your way. Atticus, your name begins with an A, so let's send you off first. Tick's stomach leaped into his throat. Okay, he stepped forward. Wait a second, Paul said. We need a send-off to pump us up. He held out his hands in the middle of the circle. Tick joined him, then Sato, then Rutger, then Mothball. Master George chuckled and put his hand out too. Rolling her eyes, Sophia finally did as well. Go Realitants! Paul yelled. He groaned at everyone else's half-hearted attempt. You guys need more team spirit. Please tell me we don't have to do that every time, Sophia muttered. Yeah, Tick agreed. I think I'm with Sophia on that. Tick shrugged. Paul looked devastated. She's corrupted you. Tick shrugged. It is kind of corny. He paused, grinning. Dude. Master George cleared his throat. Time to be off. Atticus, step up here, please. Tick did so, adjusting his tattered and soppy scarf that clung to his neck like a frightened ferret. Mothball began the goodbyes. Best of luck, little sir, she said, leaning down to give him a quick hug. Get a little older and I'll be bringing you a nice tall girlfriend from the 5th, I will. Better than a short fat one from the 11th, don't you think? She winked and stepped back. See you, big guy, Rutger said, reaching up to pat Tick on the elbow. Sorry about all the rock throwing. Tick laughed. No problem. Later, dude, Paul said next. See you on the email. Definitely. Tick turned to Sato, who reached out and shook Tick's hand. Thank you, Sato said. Next time, I will save your life. There's a good plan, Tick replied with a smile. He turned to face Sophia. She looked at him, her eyes revealing that she was trying to think of a smart aleck remark. She finally gave up and pulled Tick into a hug, squeezing tightly. Email me, she said. Tonight. Tick awkwardly patted her on the back. Remember our bet? You have to come visit me in America, and I want some more free spaghetti sauce too. Count on it. She pulled away, not bothering to hide her tears. Tick turned to face Master George again, relieved the goodbyes were over. Master Atticus, my dear friend, the old man said, his ruddy face beaming with a smile. Your family will be so proud of you, as well they should. Quite a puzzlement you've given us to figure out, I must say. Busy we'll be. Tick nodded, not knowing what to say. Very good then. Master George held up the barrier wand, having already set the controls. Put your hand on the wand. There we are. Bye, everybody, Tick said, closing his eyes, hurting inside. Master George had one final thing to say, though, whispering in Tick's ears, Atticus, never forget the inherent power of the cicada. Never forget the power of your choices, for good or for ill, and most importantly, never forget your courage. Before Tick could reply, he heard a click. He felt the now familiar tingle. Then came the sounds of birds and wind. Edgar Higginbottom sat on his favourite chair next to the window, staring at the floor, wringing his hands together as he wondered for the millionth time what had happened to Tick. He's lucky, Edgar kept telling himself. All those times as a kid, something's protecting him. He'll be fine. But it had been almost 4 full days since the boy vanished, and the worry ate at Edgar's heart like a hideous disease. Lorena was no better. They could barely look at each other without bursting into tears. Even Lisa was worried. And yet Edgar knew it had been the right thing to do. Somehow, some way he knew. Atticus Higginbottom was out saving the world, and when he was done, he'd come back home, ready for a new game of Football 3000. But when? Edgar heard someone shouting outside. A kid's voice. Tick's voice. He looked up, his heart swelling to a dangerous size when he saw Tick running down the street towards the house. For a second, Edgar couldn't move, couldn't breathe, practically choking as he tried to yell for his wife. It was him! It was really him! "Lorena!" Edgar finally managed to scream, squirming to get his big body out of the chair. "Lorena! Tick's back! I told you he'd be back!" He found himself laughing, then crying, then laughing again as he ran out to the front door. Lorena thumped down the stairs faster than he'd ever seen her move in his life. Kayla and Lisa bolted out of the kitchen, eyes wide in surprise. "He's really here?" Lorena asked, her hands on her heart as if she didn't dare hope Edgar had been telling the truth. "He's back! He's back!" Edgar yelled with delight as he ripped open the door and ran outside. Tick ran into his dad's arms. Then, almost knocking Edgar down, they hugged each other, then parted to bring Lorena and the girls into the group. In one big tangle of arms, the Higginbottom family hugged and laughed and jumped and generally made complete fools of themselves. The world had suddenly become a very bright and cheerful place to be. Finally, Tick pulled away, looking at each of his family members in turn. "I've had a crazy couple of days." Later that night, well after dark, Tick stood in the front yard under a sky thick with black clouds, not a star or moon in sight, thinking. He thought about everything that had happened to him, but his thoughts kept returning to the bizarre incidents of the letter reappearing in his journal of curious letters after Kayla had burned it, and how he'd made the barrier wand work even though Mistress Jane had broken it. Somehow, the two events were linked, but Tick couldn't begin to understand why or how. Did he have some kind of weird, freaky power? Or did Mistress Jane do something to the realities, altering how the cicada functioned? Master George will figure it out, Tick thought, trying to ignore how much it scared him. He turned to walk back inside when the ground around him brightened, the slightest hint of a shadow at his feet. To the east, a full moon appeared, shining through a brief break in the clouds. As if it were a sign, Atticus Higginbottom, Realitan Second Class, pulled out the barrier wand pendant from beneath his shirt and squeezed it in his fist. Epilogue. The Thwarted Meeting. Reginald Chew, the second best inventor and greatest businessman of all time, looked at his skin watch again. He sat atop a park bench made from the new plasticare material his company had created. Growing more furious with every passing second, the person who'd asked to meet him was late. No one was ever late for the founder, owner, and CEO of Chew Industries. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the odd note that had been mailed to him several weeks ago, without any kind of return address or postmark. He unfolded the wrinkly paper and read through the handwritten message once again. "Dear Mr. Chew, you don't know me, but we must meet very soon. I know you are aware of the realities, but that you have never had much interest in them because the fourth is so much more advanced than the others. But I have a proposition for you that I am certain you will accept. I know of your love for power. As a measure of my sincerity, I will come to your reality. Meet me in Industry Park by the One Lone Oak at noon on the 13th of May. Your future partner, Mistress Jane." Reginald crumpled the note up into a ball, squeezing it into his fist. The audacity of this woman, commanding him to meet her like he was some errand-running schoolboy, and then having the nerve not to even show up. Who called themselves mistress anyway? He looked at his skin watch one last time, then stood up. The lady was obviously not coming. As he walked back towards his building, Reginald threw the mysterious note into a roving cyclobot, angry about the time he'd wasted. There was much to be done, things he'd mapped out and set in motion long before he'd received a letter from today's no-show, Mistress Jane. Reginald was a very busy man.